The wind on Giza 47 outpost was not like Earth's wind. It howled, it cut, it punished. The human workers called it the blade breeze because it felt like knives against the skin. Most people avoided walking outside at night. It was too cold, too cruel. But Jacob Reed, a quiet maintenance worker, was walking home late after a long shift. His gloves were worn and his breath turned to fog with every step. The steel walls of the colony groaned in the distance as the wind slammed into them. He took a shortcut behind the power station, a narrow alley between two storage units. That's when he saw it, a small shape huddled beside a garbage vent. At first, Jacob thought it was just broken gear or trash. Then it moved. He stepped closer, careful, slow. It was a girl, Alien. She was curled up into a tight ball, arms around her legs, her skin a pale blue color that shimmered slightly under the red moonlight. She wore only thin cloth, torn and dirty. Her hair was matted with ice. Her shoulders shook violently. She was freezing to death. Jacob knelt beside her. "Hey," he said gently, "can you hear me?" Her eyes opened just a little, bright violet glowing faintly. She flinched as if expecting to be hit. "It's okay," he said softer now. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't speak, didn't move. Jacob looked around. No one else was out here. No patrols, no cameras, and no one coming to help. He didn't think. He acted. He pulled off his thick thermal jacket and wrapped it around her small frame. She was cold, ice cold. Her body didn't resist. She simply blinked, then slowly leaned into the warmth. "You'll freeze out here," he whispered. Carefully, he picked her up. She was so light. It was like carrying a child. Her head rested against his chest. She was still shaking. Jacob didn't understand why she was out here, but in that moment, it didn't matter. She needed help, and he couldn't just walk away. His room in the workers' quarters was small, barely enough for one person, but it was warm. Jacob laid her gently on his bunk and brought over a thermal blanket. Her eyes stayed open, watching his every move. Still no words. He placed a hot packet of soup near her, but she didn't touch it. She was scared. He pulled over the stool and sat beside the bed. "I don't know your name," he said. "I'm Jacob." "Nothing. That jacket I gave you, it's yours now. Keep it." Still nothing. Then very slowly, she whispered something in a broken voice. "Sarah." He leaned closer. "What?" She looked up at him again. "My name is Sarah." Jacob gave her a small smile. "Okay, Sarah, you're safe now." That night, she slept in his bed. Jacob didn't. He stayed in the chair, watching her, making sure she didn't slip away in the night. She looked fragile, like if he turned away, she might vanish. At some point, her hand twitched. She reached for the edge of the blanket, pulled it up, and hugged it close. Jacob saw her lips move. Just 2 words, barely a breath. "Thank you." That night, next morning, the colony went about its business. Machines roared. Drones flew. People worked. But inside room B7, something small and powerful had begun. A human and an alien. One with nothing. One who gave everything he had. A warm jacket, a blanket, and a quiet promise. "You are not alone." The heater made a soft humming sound. That was the only thing Jacob could hear. No footsteps, no words, not even breathing. He turned slightly in his chair, eyes landing on the figure curled up on his bunk. She hadn't moved much since last night. The blanket was wrapped tightly around her, covering her shoulders like a shield. His old jacket was still on her, oversized and heavy, but warm. Her violet eyes were open, watching him, careful, quiet, like a stray animal, still deciding if the hand near it was safe or a trap. Jacob didn't speak. He stood slowly and placed a small cup of broth on the table beside her. She didn't touch it. Instead, she stared at it, then at him. He gave a soft nod. "It's yours," he said. "You can have it." Still no movement. He sighed and walked over to the far wall. Sitting back down in his work chair, he grabbed a tool from the desk and began adjusting one of his broken drone wings. Click, twist, tap. He didn't try to talk again. He just let the silence stay. 10 minutes later, a soft slurp broke the air. Jacob didn't look, but inside he smiled. Over the next 2 days, A strange pattern formed. Sarah didn't leave the room. She didn't ask questions. She didn't explore. She sat quietly on the floor, not the bed, no matter how many times Jacob pointed at it. She would only eat after he did. She flinched at sudden sounds, especially boots outside the door, and she never turned her back to the window. But slowly, her eyes changed. The fear in them faded just a little. One evening, Jacob returned from a short shift carrying a fresh loaf of yeast bread from the food hall. He stepped inside and stopped. Sarah was sitting on the floor with his broken drone. Her fingers moved slowly across the surface, cleaning the dust, checking the hinges. She noticed him, pulled her hands back quickly. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jacob knelt down beside her. You're fixing it? He asked. She looked down. I used a repair service bots before they threw me out. Jacob's voice was soft. You did nothing wrong. She blinked. Her hands trembled. No one ever said that before. That night, she finally slept on the bed. Jacob gave her the space, curling up on the floor with a blanket. Around midnight, she stirred. He opened his eyes just enough to see her looking at him. She reached down and gently draped half the blanket over him. Two. Didn't say a word, just sat beside the bed with him. Two strangers sharing warmth. By the fourth day, she was speaking more, just a few words at a time. Her voice was soft. Sometimes it cracked, but it was steady. She told him she had no family, that she had been sold off-planet, that when her contract ended, the company told her she wasn't their problem anymore. No ID, no credits, no shelter. Just a broken body and a frozen alley. Jacob listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't question. When she paused, he offered warm tea or silent company. When she cried, he let her cry. And when she finished, she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Jacob looked at her carefully, then said, "Because you're still here, and that means someone should care." Sarah didn't reply, but her hand slowly reached out and rested gently on his, just for a moment. But in that moment, she wasn't just a silent guest anymore. She was beginning to feel like someone who belonged. She didn't scream, not when the nightmare came, not when her body jerked awake, soaked in sweat, not when her breath caught like it was trapped in her throat. She simply sat up, silent, shaking and wide-eyed. Jacob was already there. He didn't ask what the dream was. He didn't touch her. He just handed her a warm cup of water and sat beside the bed, waiting for her to breathe again. It was the third night in a row, and the worst one yet. "Sorry," Sarah whispered. "For what?" Jacob asked gently. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, but she shifted. A single breath, shallow, measured, controlled. The start of a verse. Her voice was still silent. But her name, he would learn it, and when she gave it, it would be hers again. The silence had changed. Not vanished, just shifted. It no longer pressed against the walls like suffocating vapor. Instead, it settled gently, like dust over something long abandoned, but finally still. 2 hours had passed since Arlen had brought her, Mira, into the small quarters above the bookstall. The door remained locked. The lights had dimmed automatically into night mode, bathing the room in faint amber. Outside, the low hum of Veritas Mon never ceased. Gears turned, pipes groaned. Somewhere, distant boots struck metal grates in regular rhythm. But in here it was quiet. Mira sat near the far wall, half curled beneath the thermal wrap he'd given her. The tunic she wore hung awkwardly, too large in the sleeves, but her grip on the cloth had eased. Her crimson hair, damp when she emerged from the basin, had begun to dry in soft, irregular waves across her shoulders. Arlen watched her out of the corner of his eye, not with suspicion, but attention. She hadn't tried to run, hadn't asked for more. She hadn't spoken again since whispering her name. But she was still here. He was still learning how much that mattered. She hadn't eaten all the ration pack he'd left beside her. Half of it remained untouched, sealed. Some kind of instinct, maybe, or training. Don't take everything. Don't be seen as greedy. Leave no trace. She hadn't slept either, at least not fully. Every so often, she blinked too slowly. Her breath would steady, body softening, but then a noise outside would jolt her awake again. Each time she glanced toward the door, to him, to the shadows above the shelves. Arlen didn't speak, just adjusted his seat, and turned back to the console's flickering screen. The Ari glyphs shimmered across the old interface, reconstructed syllables coded from long-dead chants. He rubbed at his temple, then entered a new string of variables, adjusting the breath rhythm interval on the 7th cadence. Wrong. Still wrong. No matter how carefully he shaped the waveform, the cadence collapsed before the 3rd breath because it had never been meant for text. His throat tightened. The Ari didn't write. Their knowledge passed in breath, in rhythm and space. Everything in their culture lived through the body, through voice. Memory was sacred. Memory was flesh. And now one of them, one who shouldn't exist, was here, hunched in his home, clutching his coat, silent, but breathing the language of gods. He looked at her again. Mira hadn't moved, but her gaze had shifted to the console. Her eyes, black irises rimmed with gold, watched the glyphs on the screen with steady focus. Not curious, not amazed. Familiar. He turned the console toward her slowly. She flinched barely, then narrowed her eyes. "You recognize this?" he said. Still no answer. He tapped a line of breath code and played the loop. The console emitted a soft pulse, low, rhythmic, an imitation of the chant she'd mouthed earlier in the market. Her fingers twitched, not reaching, just reacting like a trained muscle responding to old music. He waited. She didn't move. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, controlled, deliberate, then leaned forward just slightly and tapped the console once. Then again. The first tap shifted the rhythm spacing. The second removed the glyph entirely. The adjustment was precise and completely correct. Arlen blinked once. That's the proper morning interval, he murmured, only used when reciting for the unborn. Her head turned slowly toward him. No response, but not denial either. "You're not just a carrier," he said. "You were taught formally." She looked away. Her silence said everything. Not denial, not confusion, just unwillingness to offer more. Arlen nodded to himself. That knowledge is supposed to be extinct. The last oral keeper died before I was born. Still no answer. That's fine, he thought. The dead don't talk all at once. And neither do the grieving. He stood and moved to the shelf beside the old water basin. From it, he retrieved a second set of clothing, this one thinner, designed for sleep. He walked back and placed it nearby, but not close enough to pressure her. "You can wear these if you want. They're softer, easier to sleep in." She didn't move, but she didn't look away either. He backed off without comment and turned toward the mirror. The glass still held a faint layer of fog at its edges. Near the bottom, a smudge remained from where she'd traced her name earlier. Mira, the letters imperfect but firm. He hadn't cleaned it. He wouldn't. When he turned back, she was standing slowly, legs stiff, knees hesitant. She crossed the room toward the new clothes. She didn't ask him to look away, didn't gesture, didn't speak, but her body stilled in that quiet, unreadable posture again. He understood. He walked to the far wall, turned his back, and waited. A soft rustle of fabric followed. The sound of old clothes being folded carefully and placed aside. He imagined her fingers smoothing the sleeves, not because she needed to, but because it gave her control. He didn't turn around until she cleared her throat, a dry, rasping sound barely there. He turned. She was wrapped in the soft tunic and loose leggings, the hem brushing the tops of her bare feet. She sat back down near the console, arms folded under the wrap. Her posture was relaxed, but it wasn't defensive either. He approached slowly and sat across from her. She stared at the glyph still flickering faintly on the screen. He cleared his throat. "I don't record." She looked up. He clarified. "Anything ever. I write by hand, always." From under the table, he pulled out a book. Not a datapad, not a console, a real cloth-bound journal, faded, dog-eared, ink-stained. He flipped to the latest page and set it down between them. "Do you want to add something?" he asked. She stared at it for a long moment, then reached. Her hand hovered over the page just long enough to make him think she might stop. But she didn't. Instead, she began to write. The glyphs were older than his, more fluid, less rigidly spaced. The kind passed down mouth to mouth, breath to breath, Line after line flowed onto the page in near-perfect silence. When she finished, she slid it back to him and leaned back, eyes lowered. Arlen studied the text, a ritual, but not for mourning, a remembrance vow, a promise not to let a name fade in the air until the stars themselves died. He looked up, throat tight. "You kept the names," he said. "You remembered them all." She didn't nod, but her shoulders trembled just once. "I failed to remember one," he said softly. "I thought knowledge was enough. I thought if I translated it, it would be safe, but I didn't carry it the way you do. I didn't breathe it." She looked at him then. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, quiet, almost inaudible, she said most of them didn't believe it mattered anymore, that no one would come, that silence would be all that's left. She didn't speak, but she didn't flinch when he stood, didn't freeze when he passed close. When he laid out the thermal blanket on the floor, she stepped over and settled down beside it, not touching, but near, a kind of nearness that wasn't survival anymore. It was choice. Arlen turned off the lights and lay back. Mira shifted, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Before sleep claimed them both, she spoke once more. "You said you failed someone." "I did," he whispered. "I didn't speak for her when it mattered." "You did this time." He didn't know what to say to that, but he didn't have to because she'd chosen to stay. And that more than language, more than breath, was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. But it was alive, and it was growing. It had started with a scent, faint, feral, familiar. Mayer had frozen mid-sentence as it drifted from a hallway vent, burned incense, and copper, the kind used during Dari funerals. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But her silence shifted deeper, heavier. Arlen noticed immediately. He didn't speak, just closed the console and waited. After several breaths, she said, "They used to burn that after executions." Arlen nodded slowly. "They're trying to intimidate you." "No," she murmured. "They're trying to remind me who they think I am." She turned to him then, not with fear, but with resolve. "You said once you failed someone." He hesitated, then motioned toward the floor between them. "Sit. I'll tell you." She sat cross-legged, no defenses, no distance. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, voice steady but low. "My sister's name was LRA, 2 years older. We grew up in an orbital colony outside the core, one of those sterile education habitats where everyone's a prodigy by 12 or forgotten by 13. LRA was unforgettable." He paused, exhaling. "She built languages like other kids built puzzles, complex structures, fluid systems. She didn't learn speech. She dissected it, lived in it. She believed language could prevent war." Mira tilted her head. "That belief got her killed." "No," Arlen said. "My silence did." She waited. "I joined the Xenolinguistic Institute when I turned 17. She was already a star there. I was the shadow. Then the military arrived. They wanted a new kind of communication tech. Language as a weapon. They called it subjugation syntax. Commands buried in grammar. Programming obedience through sentence structure." Mara's breath hitched. "Spoken mind control. Yes, they used something like that on the border moons. Some of my people began reciting trade, and then forgot the old breath lines entirely, as if something had been erased. They were," Arlen said, jaw tight. "And my sister helped build the prototype, or they made her help." He looked down at his hands, clenched. "When I saw the alpha strings, I recognized her voice patterns embedded in the cadence, her syllable weight, her signature breath breaks. Did she survive? They said she left, but I don't believe them. Not when I heard her voice inside a weapon. The silence that followed was unlike the others they'd shared. This one wasn't hollow. It was full of guilt, memory, and something raw neither of them knew how to name." Mira finally spoke. "My mother taught me the rites in secret, not just the common ones. The origin code DX, first breath theory. She said it was older than stars, that it lived in the body, not the mind, that memory through breath could never be rewritten." Arlen nodded slowly. "That's why they hunted your people. Not for religion, not even for resistance, but because you carried a language they couldn't replicate, something that couldn't be broken down or bought. Mira's eyes flicked to the console. They tried. The collector who bought me. He had machines, neural extractors, voice recorders. Every night he'd play back what he'd pulled from others, begging prayers, parts of the rites, try to trick me into correcting them. Her voice trembled just once. I didn't speak, not even once. And he gave up. He said I was bad stock, not worth the energy. I was left to rot. That's when you found me. Arlen's throat tightened. I almost walked past you, but you didn't. He looked at her then, not as an artifact, not as a survivor, but as the one who endured when everyone else was erased. I thought helping you might make up for failing LRA. He admitted, but now I see that was selfish. No, she said it was honest. A small, still moment passed between them. Neither confession nor absolution, just recognition. Then a soft chime pinged from the console. Arlen checked the display. His face changed. What is it? Mira asked. A perimeter scan. Someone's on the stairs. She was already standing. Arlen moved quickly to the hidden hatch behind the supply rack. We're going out the back. Mira's voice was level. Is it them? Corporate. I'd bet everything. And if it is, they're not here to talk. He grabbed the journal, the breath crystal, and a ration pack. Mira retrieved her satchel. No panic. No questions, only readiness. They slipped through the vent corridor into the maintenance duct network. Pipes hissed with recycled vapor. Walls flickered with faulty power relays. Arlen guided them silently, counting steps by instinct. They'd done this before too many times. But halfway up the northern shaft, Maya stopped. She turned, breath sharp. Wait. Arlen stopped. 2. What? She reached into her cloak and pulled out a narrow strip of fabric, a band deep blue with a spiral of gold thread etched into its surface. My mother gave this to me, she said. The spiral represents the first breath, the beginning of all memory. Arlen frowned. Why now? Because if we get separated, you'll carry it. He stared at her. I won't leave you. I know, she said gently. But memory has to survive even if we don't. He took the band from her hands. It was still warm. He tied it around his wrist. Tight, firm, deliberate. I'll protect it, he said. I'll protect you. She nodded. Then they moved again. Outside, the station pulsed with static warnings. Drones buzzed the far alleys. Somewhere behind them, doors slammed open. Voices barked commands. But ahead, the upper ring waited along with the last person Arlen knew he could trust. They ran without looking back. 2 shadows moving toward the edge of something vast. Not just escape, but beginning. The warning hadn't been subtle, but in Veritas Maw, subtlety was never the point. It was about making you sweat, about letting you know how little time you had left to vanish. Arlen moved with precision, the kind that came from too many years of running. He packed only what mattered, the journal, the archive scrolls, a pulse burner, and 2 rations. Everything else could burn. Mira worked silently beside him. No panic, no flinching, just focused motion. Her hands methodically gathering the ceremonial codes and binding them in a narrow scroll wrap. Her calm unsettled him more than any noise would have. They'll come in from below, Arlen said. That stairwell is a bottleneck. We'll have to take the maintenance ducts up through the ventilation shafts to reach the outer ring.